Hi everyone, I hope that you hear me well. Welcome to the online roundtable event. Today's topic is data-driven decisions. My name is Alexander Yastrебkov. I am lead business analyst at EPAM Systems. Today I will be the moderator of this roundtable conversation. So please let me share my screen one moment. Okay. Small remark before we start. This session will be recorded and recordings will be shared after the conference. Also, there are a few points of our event. You can see it on the screen right now. The first one, you can ask questions on the specified topic in the chat. The second one, you can vote for questions you are interested in. Just press a like button. And finally, our experts will try to answer the most voted questions. Notice, please, that there is a contest for the best question, and we recommend you to ask questions with the name on them. Okay, so keep moving on. Today we will discuss the topic data-driven decisions with our outstanding experts, Ksenia Kalashnikova, Jane Bilton, and Jonathan Ryu. Unfortunately, Yulia Demyanova, one of our experts, can't join us right now because of some technical problems, but we are waiting if she could join us maybe a little bit later. So, hi colleagues, nice to meet you. Please tell us a few words about you. Jonathan, could you start, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Ryu. I'm the head of data science for EPAM Canada. Been with EPAM for a little less than 2 years. Started my career in risk management. So I spent a lot of time trying to use data to predict bankruptcy, fraud, catastrophes, epidemics, human mortality. So data has been a big part of pretty much my whole life. And I am also the author of PySpark in Action, which is a wonderful framework for large-scale data processing, which is available as a preview on Manning.
Jonathan, thank you. I want to add that authors of 5 best questions from chat will get Jonathan's book for free. So please don't forget to indicate your name before asking the question. So let's move on. Ksenia, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ksenia Kalashnikova. I'm from Belarusian office of EPAM. I've been working with EPAM for more than 2 years, previously to that working in the banking sphere. So that logically brought me to BI intelligence and data-driven decisions for newer scale projects. I've been working in basically healthcare and financial domains, but I also seen some real deal in other projects, and I'll be glad to share some insights and expertise today with you. I have been a part of both ongoing and pre-sale projects, the ones that have been expanding, the ones that have been migrating. A lot of interesting stories are coming up today, so I hope you're going to like it. And I'm also hosting the Amazing Data podcast starting next month, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So nice to meet you, everybody. Thank you for joining today, and let's have fun.
Thank you, Ksenia. I want to say that we will provide the link to Ksenia's podcast at the end of our roundtable. And Jane, please introduce yourself for us. Oh, Jane, you are muted.
Not the first time that that's happened to me. My apologies. My name is Jane Bilton. Can you switch to the next slide, please, Alexander? I'm a lead data BA in the Canadian office. I've been in the industry 30 plus years, but with EPAM 8 years, excuse me. I am absolutely passionate about data, about clients, and about the synergy between the two and making data work for our clients. And I've been basically working on very, very large data sets in big data since before big data was even a phrase. So it is my passion and it is my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I think we can moving on. So what is data-driven decisions? Data-driven decisions are decisions based on hard data rather than decisions that are intuitive or based on observation alone. There are a lot of definitions of data-driven decisions making, but this one is the most compact and clear definition, I think. I'm sure that during the process of answering questions, this topic will become more understandable and transparent for everyone. And also, I'm sure that we will learn something new with the help of our experts. So, colleagues, let me stop sharing my screen. 1 second. Okay. And now we can start the question session. I have a first question. Please let me read it. When the company begins to be called data-driven, and what does it mean? Ksenia, please, can you share your experience with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So to my point of view, there's very distinguished 3 parts of the process which has to be done before the company might be calling itself the data-driven, or actually call the decisions they're making data-driven. First of all, they have to prepare the environment and the architecture they're working right now. So the company would be capable of aggregating all the data they're having and making the most use and access to that. So the further actions might be conducted properly and more effectively. In addition to that, aside from just storing and aggregating and whatever fancy words we're going to be using here, the data, the people who are about to enter the data-driven world and data-oriented decision-making in their company, they're supposed to also be aware of the changes that are happening and get prepared in a lot of ways. Firstly, in the processes that they're having, so they cannot just store the random rubbish data and just squeeze it in and say that, okay, we're going to use that one. And also, they might be understanding why exactly they're doing that and what use they're going to make out of this data in the future and of the processes they're going to be changing. So the first and the actual step that I would figure out in here is just to make like the very first step and to build the profound foundation on how to actually enter the expected changes in your company or in your project, whatever scale you're working with. Big step forward once you say that you have a proper data warehousing, traditional or cloud-based format, whatever is suitable for your company or for your project, and you're ready to work with the data that you've already aggregated, it is a nice way to introduce analysis and those metrics and expectations that you're planning out of the data that you're having and of the one that you're going to be using. So this is a good way to start planning what exactly the goals that you're setting for your company and for your project. Like, what are you planning to achieve with that information? So let's say you want to increase the profits, like the most obvious one, or you want to decrease the risks of losing the customers or of okay, we're sharing the screen. Okay, the processes that are changing and that something is happening in your company. So, what exactly are you trying to pursue by becoming data oriented and going out on the journey of being data driven? And the third step, I would say, this is like the conclusion, and it does not happen very quickly, even if we would like it to be. That goes with the decision management. When we use the established environment and the data that we gathered and all the metrics and the analysis are actually happening into something comprehensive. So we're getting the answers or at least the insights onto the preceded goals that we were looking for. So we can start answering the questions that we're looking for. So these are like 3 major steps which are happening through a long period of time. So we cannot say that everything can be conducted within a year or a day or whatever. Every company has their own deadlines and their own approaches and their like different ways how to handle this transformation. But I would say that these are the milestones which ideally has to be passed whenever you are transferring onto the data-oriented and data-driven culture in your project or in your company, and differing from the goals and from the sets that you're establishing for yourself. You can vary that a little bit, but in the majors, those approaches are the top-notch, and you have to start with them in order to have a smoother enter into the data world, let's call it this way.
Thank you, Ksenia, for the comprehensive answer. And Jane, please, could you share your experience?
Certainly. It's my experience that moving into the data-driven world of decision-making is moving from that world of I believe, I gut feel, I think, this is what I expect, therefore this is what I'm going to do. It's moving into a fact-based, based on qualitative and quantitative analysis of the data. It requires that, first of all, you understand what the questions you are, or rather you have, that you need to ask yourself to manage your business. It depends on collecting your data and getting the data from the right source, making sure that it's viable and making sure that it's correct and recreatable in terms of pulling in consistent data, making sure that you understand how to profile your data and make sure that it is correct and that you understand what that data is and get rid of duplicates and all kinds of information that can clutter or mess up your data. And then moving forward to continuing to grow and evaluate that data and being able to make decisions based on what is actually happening, not what you expect, and therefore, filling up your business plans with what you expect to happen rather than what has been happening and what your forecasts and your models show will be happening in the future.
Well, thank you, Jane. It's very interesting. Thank you. And Jonathan, please, your point of view.
So my experience, I believe that every company is data-driven. I think most of them are accidentally data-driven. If you're looking in a grand scheme of things, the moment that you're going for a business loan, the moment that you're going to the market, the moment that you're presenting results for the end of your quarter, you are producing data. And if you are not using that data to make decisions and you can't rely on the quality of your data like Ksenia and Jane were putting forward, well, this is a data signal for the market that you are a company who's not in control of the data you own or the data you're producing. Data is information, and just like information, the quality, the veracity can be wildly different. I think everybody uses data to make decisions, but as Ksenia and Jane were mentioning, when we're talking about data-driven, I would like to add kind of another qualifier is actively data-driven. If you're chasing your data to be better, it makes a huge difference than if you're just passive in front of your data. And we're seeing a lot of companies that basically have that data that they've been collected because, it's everybody wants to be data-driven, but they're not acting on it. Well, then it becomes just a liability and you're having the worst of both worlds. So data-driven is one thing, but you have to make sure that you're driving, not somebody else.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. So let's imagine we have an infinite list of companies, shops, marketplaces, gas stations, banks, and so on. Theoretically, all of them need to make data-driven decision. And the question is, when the company understands the need to use data-driven decision-making, what are the factors? For example, maybe it's a stage of growth. Jane, what do you think?
So I think there's various factors that lead to becoming more of a, as Jonathan says, an actively driven data-driven company that is understanding, leveraging, and moving forward with their data. I think that a lot of companies are in mature states already, and they use, I think 20% is the stat that I've heard, that 20% of new companies, their growth is driven through data and innovation of new products and understanding how to use the strengths that they have as leverage through their data to identify new products and identify new areas of interest and area of sales. So I think for a mature company, it gives you that extra bandwidth to get a little bit more breadth out of your business. For startup companies, I think, Twitter, they always say that they wish they'd started doing things right from the beginning, because the more data and the more accurate data you have and the more relevant data that you are logging and keeping allows you from the get-go to understand your market, understand your clients, your consumers, the drive that is behind your business, and can let you leverage and grow your business in the way that's most appropriate. So I think, data is important at any phase or any stage of a company's business. I think the recognition of what data you have available to you, what questions you need to ask yourself about your business, and where you want to grow, and does that data match what you want to do, is key for any stage of the business.
Oh, thank you, Jane.
Okay.
It's very, very interesting. Jonathan, I can repeat the question, or you can share your experience.
I can jump in. So to me, a company, it's not a matter of size or how many years you've been in the business. We see classical manufacturers that are still managing their business like we were in the previous century, where some startups are data-driven from the start. To me, it really has to do about availability of data. So can someone access the data in an easy fashion to answer the question? Second part is understanding. So is the data documented? Are you able to get answers to your question? The data lake architecture was especially popular because a lot of people thought they could just dump their data inside of it. And what made the difference between successful and unsuccessful architecture is the data is actually usable when it's inside your lake. And then the third one, which to me is the most important, is audit. When you make a decision based on data, do you actually get back to your results? And do you actually measure how right or how wrong you were? And I'm taking this more from an analytics and data science perspective, but once you've developed a model or once you've developed a dashboard, how do you make sure that it actually accomplishes its goal? And as you're wrapping up a project, the mindset is build, build, build. And then you end up having flawed decision making because nobody takes the time to take a step back, go back to what you've produced, and make sure that it's still worthwhile. Not everything needs to be done into a sexy new tech, but those foundation are to me what really, really makes a difference. And it's not, I would say, as a matter of fact, big companies probably have a harder time to be data-driven decision-making because they've been successful and they think they can continue being successful without the usage of data.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ksenia, if you want, I can repeat the question, or...
No, that's okay. Honestly, I would like to be a little bit, like the bummer and the potty pooper in here, because my colleagues are here actually telling about the right way how to get to the point, like how to bring yourself to starting the data-driven initiative. But unfortunately, we do not live in the ideal and in the perfect world. And a lot of companies, whether they're big or small startups or already for a lot of years on the market, whatever, they do enter the understanding that they do need data to make decisions once they've already had some major screw-ups and lost something that was very important for them. And they saw that, I wish we had data for this so we could prevent it and had like a better output or better outcome of whatever we just had. So I would say that in a lot of ways, sometimes the good way for a company to become a data-driven is just to approach the understanding that it's time for them. It's not like the discovery phase, or whenever we're opening additional branch, or whenever we're like going international or something. There's no this kind of like on a click decision. It's just their inner understanding that okay, right now we're doing something that is not helping. We are losing our money, our clients, our profits, and the impact that we could have been having, and we have to start like relying on something better than just our assumptions, just basically as Jane mentioned in the very beginning, that we should not just bias the data onto our opinions. We just have to stay as independent as possible. So I would say that there's no particular stage when the company should go to the data-driven approach. The great answer is like from the very beginning, as the guys mentioned. But the key thing is that you should go data-driven once you understand that it's time. And if you don't do that now, things are just gonna, like go worse, and you have to save yourself and your business and your project and just revolve. And data would be that kind of answer to your problems.
Well, thank you, Ksenia. Thank you very much. We already have a question from our listener. How to be sure that I've made the right decision using data? But I think that Jonathan has already answered this question. So we can move on to another question from the audience. How can a classic BA with no coding background transition to a career that is BI data-driven? I think that Jane maybe can help us with the answer. Jane, are you still with us?
Yes, yep.
Yes,
hello.
Please.
Sure. So I started out as a programmer, so I have a little bit of the technical background, so it's a little bit different for me, but I've mentored and I've watched many people that have started out as general BAs, either in digital or just in generalists, that have had an interest in data and wanted to migrate to the data BA. And the one thing I can say, there are people out there that have a passion for data and are curious about the data. How does it relate? How is it clean? How is it extracted? Is it accurate? Is it relevant? And I think that a big portion of making a successful data BA is having that passion and the curiosity about the data. And as all of us BAs know, we all have our sort of favorite aspect of analysis. And the one thing that you will know when you're the right person to transition to a data BA is you have a passion, you have an interest, you're curious about the data, you want to get your hands on it, you want to understand what the trends are, you want to understand what the quality of that data is. And I think that above all for a data BA is the key factor.
Jane, thank you. I think as a BA, yes, Ksenia, I want to add something. Ksenia, please.
Yeah, just a teeny tiny comment, because I actually grew up to be the BI business analyst out from the classical one. I still do the responsibilities of both, but I kind of did this transition that was asked. And the way Jane actually described is the path I actually took. I was interested in the data. It was never just okay for me to, like have the total amount or like the grand result of something. I wanted to see more, like why exactly did we get this kind of data? What was the trend? What was the benchmark? And out of just having, like the overall information, you come back to having this giant spreadsheets, trying to go row by row and to understand the core issues of that. So I would say that exactly, you have to be just passionate about the data and see that there's more in those numbers that you see right now and want to dive in to see more, to see the precondition, to see the pre-story of that.
Thank you, Ksenia. I see one more question in our chat. It's very interesting. The question is, what are the most common mistakes that companies make when working with data? Can you give some examples when bad data lead to bad decisions? I think we can talk about difficulties, and I think that you agree with me that going to make data-driven decisions on the company level is not a simple thing. So what can prevent a company from making data-driven decisions? What is the biggest problem? Jonathan, share your experience, please.
In 90% of the case, if I'm approximating from my own experience, most of the problems are they're related to the organization. There you go. So you have kind of the process where IT kind of assemble all of that data, but on the business standpoint, you still have those silos. You have data SMEs that don't talk with one another. All of the processes are being done independently, and basically linking the data from one division to the other. So if we take the example of a bank, well, mortgage information might not be as easy as checking or savings account information, and the linkage can be tedious or impossible to make. So what happened into those cases, and especially with the demand for faster results and to be able to iterate, and there's some heavyweight that are kind of promoting a way to like move fast and break things. Well, what happened is you set up your code, set up your data environment, make a few assumptions that may pay off in the short term, not on the long run, and create that kind of data technical debt that arises from a lack of understanding. And I would say those ones are a lot more problematic than making an error in the first place. As Jane and Ksenia was mentioning, like a data BA is really interested about going through the source and understanding what it is. But what happened if the whole foundation that you're building your product just switch over you, and there's no continuity and no maintenance plan? Then you end up having a bunch of product that are doing almost the right thing, and they end up being sunset, like there's no tomorrow. And people yet on the decision-making layer, if they're not informed about this, if they're not kept into the loop, and if your organizational structure doesn't follow those changes, well, you may end up being an executive that's going to make a decision that's completely wrong because the data source that you used to use has been depreciated for 1.5 years. And that happens more often than what I would be willing to admit. And every company, like it's an ongoing fight. But I would say, to me, like this is the biggest risk and the biggest kind of mistakes that I'm seeing, where you go back, you look at, as we're working for a consultancy, but you're reviewing a business process that is using data, and basically out of 14 tables, 12 of them are stale. It warrants some questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Maybe somebody want to add a comment to that?
I'd like to add a comment.
Yes, Jane.
One of the things that I have found that can be problematic in terms of the ability of somebody to make a correct decision and to understand that they're making a decision based on valid data is we often have people making assumptions on what a number is. I've seen companies where they will see total sales, and that means one thing to one person and it means something completely different to another. Depending on how that data is loaded into the data lake and what the governance is and what the rules and definitions are applied, people often make assumptions that they know what that data is, and in fact they don't. And that is a very, very dangerous thing when it comes to decision making, and something that I have seen companies fight with consistently, where they don't have the governance, they don't have the definitions, they don't have their data dictionaries set up, or their lineage isn't properly understood for their data. So they are making assumptions based on terminology that they're familiar with, but in a different way than somebody else in another department would be. So it's very difficult. If you don't have that underlying understanding of what exactly that data is and exactly where it comes from and exactly what it means, then those assumptions and overlying beliefs in what that data is can lead you to make decisions that may not be as fruitful as you'd hope.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay.
Let's move on to another question. So, what about practice? Nowadays, each company has databases, reports, but as I understand, this is not a guarantee that decisions are made on the basis of this data. So the question is how to transform data, reports, numbers into decisions. Yeah, Jonathan, please.
I mean, this is a very, I mean, if we crack that code, maybe we could like start our own company. In all fairness, you know, all of that dimension, you know, at the end of the day, data, report, a model, data products, they've been built for a purpose. And it is, I mean, if you don't ask the question about what problem are you trying to solve before you build your product, it is near impossible to try to find purpose out of an analysis when you're always at the almost at the finish line. And we see that a lot. You know, data science is fancy, and people basically collect model like other people collect hockey cards. You know, after that, you're like, oh, we're able to predict scenario A, but what's interesting to the business is B, C, D, E. So connecting up front, and you know, this is why this topic, you know, data BA is so near and dear to my heart, because data science and analytics is something that is in complete effervescence, and a lot of people are coming, and a lot of the roles are mixed up. But understanding what you're solving and the same way that you approach any software engineering project still has its place into weaponizing your data. Once you're there, if you're at the finish line and you're still wondering how you can use that to do decision making, it means you missed a step somewhere in the process. And unfortunately, for the most part, unless you're extremely lucky or your analysis is extremely general, you will need to go back to the drafting board. Not everything is lost, but you will have to make significant changes on your data product to support decision making. Data supports decision. Decision do not support data.
Well said. Thank you, Jonathan. We have.
Can I add a small comment onto that, like a tiny comment?
Yes, Ksenia, of course.
I would totally agree on that. And I would say that if by the end of your analysis, you got some answer that you do not comprehend, probably like there are like two answers here, is that either you were answering not the question that you actually asked in the very beginning, or that you lost your focus and you were just like now devoted to completely different issues. So for example, that in the very beginning you were trying to answer question A, like, okay, what would happen if we are going to increase, like say, this something? And you started gathering information, run some reporting, do the analysis, gather the metrics and the KPIs. But in the end of that, you're like, okay, what does that mean? That kind of means that either you were collecting the wrong data, the one that is not representative to you, that you do not understand how to use it and how to approach it, or you actually gather the information that does not help you answer this question, or is basically aimed into something completely different. So I would totally agree with Jonathan onto that, so that unless your data is super generic, you have to go a couple of steps back, because the data that you have right now is not helping you. It's actually making you more confused and taking you out of the initial goal that you've been setting, and is just distracting you from the actual reason why you conducted this analysis, and is stopping you from getting the result that you were looking for. So I would agree on the point that if you do not understand the data that you gather, that probably it's not the one that you've been looking for, or you do not really recall the question that you've been answering and gathering this information for. That's it.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add just, I'd like to add just one other perspective on that, and that is both Jonathan and Ksenia spoke to the question of getting the right data and understanding the question. And I'd just like to speak to the other end of that, which I think is also key, which is the visualization of that data or the presentation of that data. Because having the right data, if it's not presented in a way that is meaningful and interpretable, and you can apply that to your business, then all of the data in the world is not going to get you where you need to go. So I think there's the two parts. It's acquiring and understanding the data you acquire and how and why you acquire it. And then there's how do you visualize it and how do you use those visualizations to help make your decisions.
Maybe to close the loop before we go, one of the thing is I was playing back the answer, and we're not monsters. Like, I mean, if we're trying to solve a problem and we don't have all of the data that's necessary, we're not just going to like cross our arms and say like, go back to data collection, talk to me in 2 years. But you know, I think it's important to be honest with ourselves, and I think clear communication with your stakeholders. Let's say you're missing like you're doing a risk model for a bank, and the quality of your data on balance owed on credit card, for instance, is incomplete. Well, you have to be upfront with your stakeholders, and then you can make a decision and say, okay, we're going to wait, or we're going to continue. We're going to see if we're seeing lift, and that's going to justify the data collection to get the truck rolling. But you know, it's not like wait until the data is perfect and then start. It's really an iterative process, and you know, usually like it's kind of a journey, like where you start in the data, you want to do something, and then you realize that the data quality is not good, so now you don't want to do anything. Like the real answer is kind of in the middle.
Jonathan, thank you very much. I know that we have another question which you totally want to answer. Let me read it. Are there top number of common metrics which are must for taking data-driven decision? I can repeat. Okay, I can repeat. Jonathan, you are muted. Are there top number of common metrics which are must for taking a data-driven decision?
There's too many to list. I would say, you know, kind of the golden standard, and that comes from statistical theory, and that's my only theoretical moment for the day. You know, when you're looking at predicting real numbers, you know, which are like amounts or a quantity or something like that, mostly on the forecasting space, mean square error, which is basically how, if you're taking a test sample to test how valid your analysis or your model is in the case of forecasting, you're going to take your value that you predicted, you're going to subtract the value that actually happened during your testing window, and you're going to square it. And basically what it does is the closer you are to the real value, the lower the score. And that gives you at least a first indication of how far you are when you're building something. I am not very aware of like if there's any blanket metric for like data visualization or dashboarding or even you know, creating post hoc analysis. But you know, in the terms of data science, like I would say if you're meeting a data science and he doesn't know what MSC is, find another data scientist. It's like take someone else.
Thank you, Jonathan. Jane, I know that you want to add something. Please, welcome.
So I was just going to add that, and thank you, Jonathan, sort of put it in squarely in the data analysis, the analytics side of things. When you ask me as a BA, are there a common set of metrics for data-driven decision? I think there are common sets among domains, and there are common KPIs among levels or just of decision makers. In other words, management, manufacturers, or different aspects of what your role is, and also different aspects of what your domain is. But I would say to say a top 3 across all domains and all roles would be extremely difficult, because people need to understand the metrics that are relevant to them and to their business. And those are the metrics that they should be looking to pull the data to support and be able to analyze that data.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Okay, colleagues, one more question. I know that companies are always faces with situation. On one side of the scale, there is a data analyst who knows all the numbers and statistics. And on the other side, there is for example, a director of marketing department, for example, with his experience and salary. And they are talking about different strategies. They see the different ways of business improvement. So the question, whose opinion is more important? Data analyst or highest paid person opinion? Who can?
Are you saying that your data analyst is not the highest person paid?
For example, yes.
You know, it's like I think this is a trick question, because at the end of the day, it's decision making is always a consortium of sort. You know, if you have the highest paid person syndrome, it's going to apply regardless if there's data or not. Like, everybody's going to, like, this to me is more an organizational problem rather than a data driven problem. It will translate, and you know, a lot of data analysts are struggling where, you know, the opinion of their boss or manager or even executive sponsor, they're going to be like, yeah, can you make the data look a little bit nicer? But this is just a syndrome, seriously, I can't pronounce that word, an organization problem that is just translated into a data-driven problem. And I'm pretty sure Ksenia and Jane from there, although they're data-driven BA, but you know, before that they were BA in multiple other domains. This applies everywhere. You know, it doesn't have to be data.
Yeah, exactly. If I can add on this, I would like to even wrap it up into close one sentence. If you are holding data analysis to become data driven, but once you hear the results of this analysis and you don't want to hear, or you disagree with something that you're hearing, that one, why did you actually do that? And two, this exactly is something that the organizational issue is about, because you are doing this to become better, to make your processes better, to make your company better, but now you're kind of refusing any attempt onto getting insights onto how this can become better. So if you are having the analysis, but you do not listen to whatever results the data analyst has given you, that makes absolutely no point, and that kind of nullifies whatever you've already done now. So I would totally agree on to that it has to be the effort that you're making together. It's not a war that who's going to win, like data analyst is going to win or highest paid person is going to win. It's always about collaboration, and I'm sure Jane wanted to answer on that one. It's about how you can mix up your opinions and blend them together to make something better and something that is actually working. It's not one person's opinion, it's the aggregation and the mixture of a lot of opinions which are aimed onto making something better than it is now.
Yeah, I would add to that data-driven decision-making is a team effort. You need your analyst, you need your analytics, you need your business knowledge, and without one, you can't do any, really. You need to work as a team collaboratively. You need to have mutual respect, and to Ksenia's point, know why each person is doing the job that they are. And you know, that senior mega bucks making executive is also there for a reason. He has a lot of in-depth knowledge about the business and about what he has seen in the trends in that business. And you can work with him to get the right data to verify those trends or not. So he comes with a lot of intuitive information, a lot of general information. You come with the data to show where that is correct and where that differs, and together you can understand how to get the data and do the analysis to make the appropriate decisions.
Thank you, Jane. We have a lot of questions from our listeners about real-life examples. So who can say something about bad decisions made when having no data, and what is resulted? Same about great decision using what data and positive outcomes. Yes, I see Jonathan, please.
So, you know, we were consulting for an apparel company. So I'm going to try to stay light on details, but Canada is a big country. Like, you know, it takes approximately 6 hours by plane to cross it over. And there is a lot of different topography. People are taller in certain areas, shorter in another area. And one of the key points is that was actually a pretty interesting problem where our business sponsor was saying that they were not selling as equally in certain location compared to some other. And you know, they asked for machine learning. They wanted a machine learning approach to solve that problem. And we started looking at the data, and the very, very first question that we asked is, you're aware that the size distribution of your apparel shouldn't be the same for every store. You know, we can look at curves and saying like how much small, how much medium, how much large, how much X large, etc. that you can send. And then basically, instead of consuming a super expensive machine learning model to develop using data that was incomplete, we started with just, we're going to use demographic curves and translate that into cloth sizing. 2 weeks later, we were ready to send the experiment to justify the investment for a fuller project. They increased their sales by 3% over the testing period, which was a couple of months. And then we ended up never going further because it was such a good start for them. They wanted to continue their data collection, wait a little bit, experiment a little bit with the allocation. So we ended up productionizing kind of a smart algorithm to allocate the right size to the right location, given that they receive a certain quantity, and avoid creating something ultra complicated just to be able to answer a simple question. The lesson there is, there's a reason why you made every decision in your company. The moment that you go back to the root cause analysis, you're able to change a couple of parameters, start experimenting, and when it's going to be time to invest a ton into making the decision, it's going to be clear. But don't try to rush things. And you know, there's that joke that everybody uses for everything. Like, you know, you have a problem, you say you're going to be using machine learning. Now you have like e to the infinite number of problems. Don't go too fast. You always compare yourself. Don't compare yourself to what you hear in the news. Don't compare yourself to what you hear on PR piece. Compare your company or compare your business line to where they were yesterday, and try to make incremental improvement. And that's going to secure your reputation. That's going to position yourself as somebody being careful and trying to generate value to the business rather than just throwing some stuff up in the air and looking what sticks. And this to me is a good example. Like, everybody wants to do like the coolest thing in the universe, and everybody wants to do deep learning, and everybody wants to do those fascinating things that Google are doing. Pretty sure that Google doesn't use deep learning for everything. There's still a place for like reporting. There's still a place for analysis. And in 2020, Excel is still the most popular tool in the business. So you're not selling yourself short by looking at your process and going incremental rather than listening to the highest paid person that says, I don't know what problem we're solving, but I think the answer is machine learning.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ksenia, yes.
Yeah, I would like to add like small comment because we actually had a very similar situation onto the one that Jonathan was describing. The project has been expanding and they needed a new approach onto how to store the data, and the amount of data was actually increasing greatly month after month. So it was not an easy way to predict like, okay, what kind of capacity we're going to need this month, because it was drastically changing the next month. So the first suggestion was like, okay, guys, we need to improve the storage so that your current application would be stable and it would be able to continue working as expected and handle all the changes which are current right now. And from the customers, we actually heard the answer like, okay, yeah, that's important, but this can wait. We want machine learning. And it was like, wait, but this is a crucial thing. We need to fix this one first before we actually start onto something more complicated. Machine learning can wait. They're like, yeah, well, we kind of were already having storage for a long time. It kind of works. Yeah, sometimes that goes crazy and sometimes we lose the data. Well, that can wait. But machine learning is something that we actually need. And it was more of the negotiation onto how to put the priorities onto the approach to the change in demand for the company, because they heard the buzzword and they actually thought that this is going to solve their problem. But in the real world, the problem was way easier and more, like banal and ordinary than they actually wanted. They thought like machine learning is going to change that. But actually the change of the approach onto the storage changed the problem and solved the problem. So I do agree that in a lot of ways you have to not jump into the conclusions or the buzzwords or go follow the trends. Like you open the article and say that the top 10 popular trends for 2020 or something. You have to first focus on the crucial things before you actually start doing something fancier and more advanced. And that would not affect whatever is already working and would not affect your further movement onto something fancy and advanced. So step by step, and the first step might be as ordinary as it sounds. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ksenia. And I think we have a couple of minutes for the last question. So, as a generic BA, what are the key courses and certifications we have to follow in order to become data BA? Jane, I know that you can answer it, so please, a few minutes.
Sure, I will. But first, I just want to add on a tandem to what was said by both Jonathan and Ksenia. Don't underestimate how often projects and companies do make those kinds of decisions. I too am on a client right now where I was there a year ago. They had a new tool. They just wanted to throw everything into a data lake. They had no idea what or why. This project was not successful because there was no, prioritizing. It was just find out what data you can and throw it into the data lake. We're back again this year. It's a very different game. They've had time to realize what their mistakes were. We've sort of rethought things and are doing things in a more business-driven way. So I think just as a summary to what both Ksenia and Jonathan said, happens all the time. It's our responsibility to help make business decision makers and stakeholders understand the priorities of what kinds of things can be really, really important to helping them and what kinds of things are nice to have add-ons once we've got the foundation set. So having said that, I will now go back to the question that you directed at me, Alexander. My apologies. I will publish, there's a question and answer spot outside of this. I will publish a list of various courses and certifications. It's really dependent on the country in which you live as to whether you want to go to a course and take a course. Here in Canada, I took a continuing education certificate on enterprise data analytics. There's all kinds of courses, online courses. Once again, I would ask people that you work with, that you respect, what courses and certifications have they taken and how did they get there? And I would go with your interests. What are your interests? And Google can be your friend when it comes to finding courses that can help you, support you in the direction that you want your career to take.
Thank you, Jane. So we have 4 minutes left, and colleagues, I just want to say thank you, and I'm glad to say that we have a great present from. I'm sorry. We have a great present from Jonathan. All participants can find the discount in the chat right now. As you can see, there are 2 codes. The first one allows you to get 50% discount on Jonathan's book, PySpark in Action. The second one allows you to get 40% discount on the whole catalog of books. Just follow the link and enter the code. I want to remind that we will choose 5 best questions from our chat and send the author's codes with 100% discount on Jonathan's book, PySpark in Action. Also, in the chat, you can see the link to Ksenia's Kalashnikova podcast, Amazing Data. Join the Amazing Data show to find out how people from various industries faced the same data-related issues. Please notice that the first episode will be available in early June. And let me summarize. I want to thank all of you for joining the conversation. Many thanks for comprehensive and informative questions and answers, of course. I hope you spent this hour profitably, and I want to remind that we will try to answer all questions from this chat and post it on the Z-Days portal. Also, this session will be recorded, and recordings will be shared after the conference. And you can ask questions in our topic discussion space. You can find the link in the chat. Let me post it. 1 second, please. Yes, here's the link to our question space, to our experts. And don't forget to visit other Z-Days events and activities. So thank you, colleagues. Good luck and stay safe.